Hello, I'm at 5G World with Gabriel Brown from Heavy Reading. First conference, I think, for both of us for about 18 months. It's good to be back in a way. It's good to see people again. I mean, what's your perspective, Gabe? You know, what do you think? We've only been here for half a day, obviously, but there's been a few presentations so far. We've had a chance to talk to a few people. What do you feel, I guess, first of all, about being back at a physical show, and you know, what are your thoughts on this one in particular?
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I mean, in one way, it's like honestly, it's like never been gone. You know, a trade show is basically a trade show, and it's almost like you kind of haven't missed it. But it's actually turned out to be a fantastic morning. Honestly, I've got to say, just bumping into people, having a chat, loads of different kind of off-agenda topics, if you know what I mean.
Can't get that virtually.
Seeing old faces, contacts, friends. It's really good. I think it's the event is 5G World. Clearly, the large majority of people are UK based.
Yeah.
But I did hear, by report anyway, someone's come from Finland.
Okay.
And I saw someone's come down from Scotland.
Yeah.
Paul Gowan. So it's
not easy any distance these days.
There's a bit of that. Yeah, it's been great. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to, it's been a while since we've met a little bit recently, the Vodafone deal. We can talk a bit about that because they were chatting about some 5G issues. But we've seen 5G now being rolled out quite substantially, I think, in some markets. We're at a point where I think it's a couple of years really since it was first launched. I mean, I'm just interested to get your thoughts as an analyst on, has it sort of lived up to the expectations? Has there been anything different about it that you weren't expecting to see? And are you feeling kind of optimistic about where the direction of travel is? What do you see on the horizon, I guess?
I think that's a good question in the sense that about the expectations. That's what everyone's talking about and asking about. The problem with answering it is, well, what were your expectations?
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And we can't really say, if we take all the hype and put it all together from every angle, obviously no way are we anywhere close to it, and so forth. So from that point of view,
well, I mean,
but did anyone ever have that expectation?
I suppose, I mean, one thing I've heard come up a few times at the show so far is people trying to talk about the revenue side of it. There's a lot of talk about it as a technology that operators need, and there's a lot of talk about the efficiency benefits, but there's constantly this desire, I guess, with these new generations for them to unlock some kind of sales opportunity that didn't exist in the past. And I mean, I guess we haven't really seen that in a lot of markets on the consumer side. I mean, do you think it will come, or are you thinking that enterprise might make a kind of change for operators when that starts to get going?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, as a user, as a customer.
Yeah.
If you're not running an app that tells you what bands and all stuff that's running, or you're not running a speed test, things like that, you wouldn't notice the difference really.
Yeah.
You've got the 5G icon, and that's good. I would say if you get a 5G icon, in general, you're going to get a very good service. It might not be 500 megabits per second downlink, but it'll probably be 100 or 80 or 150 or so. You'll get a good service.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I don't think it's really changed that much how we interact with services.
Yeah.
But it's starting to change. If you have an unlimited plan, you do this, you do more, and so forth. So.
Yeah. Is coverage a problem at all for consumers? I mean, maybe, like as you say, it's not something they really notice because the experience isn't that different from 4G, but I know there have been complaints from some of the vendors. I mean, it's a bit of self-interest, I guess, that Europe's rollout hasn't been quite as fast as in other parts of the world, that it's still quite spotty in some markets. I mean, is that a band issue, or is that something else that's
Well, I think number one, for customers, I would bet you're the same. For me, it's the same. Coverage is just the number one thing.
Yeah.
You need it, you want it, it's not good enough, it needs to be better, and that's kind of constant. And we want to see better coverage all the time. That's more important than anything, pretty much.
Yeah.
In terms of Europe and the bands and so forth, the deployment of C-band or mid-band has been, it's changed in different countries. But there's a couple of things going on. One is it's shown us that with C-band or mid-band, whichever phrase, you're going to get a certain amount of coverage off these systems, but you're not going to get enough coverage on the cell grids we have. So clearly there's going to need to be, and there is, a move to putting 5G in low bands. I think that's really important, and we'll see a lot more of that in the coming years.
Yep.
Going back to the mid-band systems, well, I think an advantage of taking the time a little bit is that by now you're seeing second and third generation product from the vendors. And now at the time, everyone's like, oh, don't worry about that. What we've got now is great. But clearly these new products are a lot better.
Yeah.
So now as operators invest, they're getting a much more kind of mature, capable, massive MIMO product for mid-band. So that's going to give them more confidence, and it's going to be kind of steady build out, I think.
We've seen a bit of that this week, haven't we? I think there was a new Ericsson update even on some of their equipment. There's a lot of fascination with low weight, massive MIMO boxes, isn't there, I guess, because that just makes it a lot easier for you to get these things on rooftops and they're more energy efficient as well. And is that starting to make a difference in terms of making it easier for operators to
Well, I think the weight is kind of a proxy for how good of a technology solution you have in some ways, but obviously it changes the two different configurations that have an impact there. What I thought was quite interesting, and I think we were both there. We had this from the Vodafone UK network people. They were saying, well, one thing is, weight does make a difference. Power obviously is very important, but it's not so much that it's a one-man or one-person carry, because that's not really the issue in most cases. It's more to do with the supporting infrastructure you need on the edge of a building. And so that's why when you look around and you spot 5G sites, some of us do, you'll see that very often they've had to put new steels, new kind of support infrastructure in, because first of all it's the weight and the wind loading is part of it, but also the fact that you have to have the massive MIMO panel needs to be, if it's on a rooftop, it needs to be right at the edge of the rooftop so that the beam forming can actually work properly. If you're clipping off the bottom because it's set back a little bit, so that's one of the reasons why it's taking time. It's not just that they don't want to invest. It's like you have to go and rebuild the site quite often to actually deploy this.
You don't want those falling off. So.
You don't want them falling off, and you want to get the best benefit from beamforming in a massive MIMO system. Yeah,
and can beamforming itself, going back to the sort of densification issue, and you were saying there's been quite a lot of use of things like DSS to ensure that we do get coverage. Is that going to be good enough? If you talk to Ericsson, they say, well, if you look at South Korea, they have mid-band rolled out and a very dense network grid, and in the future that might allow some of these services that operators do, hope perhaps will boost sales, and certainly that they're going to need to support. Is that going to be a problem for European operators because of...
Basically, it is, but it depends on the operator and what their grid is and how many sites they have and so forth. It's the same issue now in the US with the big C-band rollouts underway. And their operators there are kind of saying, we think we're going to do pretty well on the grid and we're going to be able to get contiguous coverage.
So you don't see a lot of talk about actually building new sites. I know there's been a bit of talk about it in Germany by Deutsche Telekom, but I don't hear many other European operators saying we need to actually build new sites out there.
They don't want to, but we do need it. We need it as customers. They need it really to get the density and it comes down to the coverage. They don't want to, but we need it. But it's so difficult. It's like, can you get a permit? Can you get a landlord? Are they going to charge too much rent?
Right.
And it's a big problem, really.
And it's a capex investment as well, I suppose, isn't it? It's quite a substantial cost to put this new equipment up anyway. So.
Yeah, but look, without it, we're dealing with a 20-year-old grid.
Right.
Design, a grid for voice, essentially. And it's going to get filled in a little bit, but that's, the big advantage in Korea is they've got a dense grid.
And that's just something they've always had in place ever since the days of sort of 2G and 3G, that denser network grid, really? Or?
I don't know. I don't know how long they've had that, but it's a problem.
There. Great. Well, that's good to talk to you. We'll wander around for another day and a half, and we'll come back later and see what else is going on. But thanks for joining me, Gail.
Good stuff.